Can I help you? Hey, friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to Wrestling Channel. That's Wrestle Juice, of course. I don't know why I said that. Time for another Ask Wrestle Juice. You guys leave a bunch of questions. I give you all the answers. Not quite all, because there's a bunch of questions here, and I don't have time for 84 of these. Diehard Homer says, is there hope that the women's division in WWE will get better after WrestleMania? So a large part of the conversation right now amongst the internet wrestling community is Paul Levesque. Triple H has not been doing too bang up of a job with his women's division, and this conversation was exacerbated, to use a big money word, by a report from Sean Ross Sapp, who has said, I mean, he just sort of mentioned this on his show, The Hump, over there at Fightful, said that, I'm paraphrasing, a bunch of the women have actually reached out to him and been like, this kind of sucks. Like, the booking for the women's division is not great. Let's be honest. Hasn't been great for a while. Vince McMahon kind of established such a deep low in terms of booking across the board that when Triple H took over, kind of anything was better. And he did do some really cool stuff in terms of allowing these performers to find who their characters are. He's done a really, really good job. A lot of the characters, a lot of the performers from 2022 and on have actually kind of figured out who they're supposed to be portraying, and they portray these characters in a much more confident manner. That goes across the board for the men and the women, tag teams, whatever. Let's talk about the women, though, because right now, the women's division, let's contrast it to last year's build to WrestleMania. You had Bayley winning the Royal Rumble. She had an ongoing saga with the Judgment Day. Meanwhile, at the same time, I'm sorry, not Judgment Day, Damage Control, her old faction, Damage Control. They kicked her out. She fought Io Sky at WrestleMania. She won the title there. And then he really did nothing with Bayley after that. Like, there was no story for Bayley after WrestleMania. We all know that Rhea Ripley is one of Paul Levesque's favorite characters. And yes, over the past 12 months, she was in a protracted feud with Liv Morgan. And that was kind of it. And now she's just sort of waiting for Elimination Chamber for somebody to win that, and then for there to be a match. Now, after Elimination Chamber, she has a match with Io Sky. The speculation right now is perhaps that Liv Morgan will win Elimination Chamber, and then they'll somehow, some way turn that into a triple threat at Mania with Rhea Ripley, Io Sky, and Liv Morgan, which I don't think is a terrible idea, because I feel like the match will be good. And there are some pre-existing stories that they can really sink their teeth into from the Chamber until Mania. But the bottom line is, across the board, there has been a significant drop off in the quality of the creative. It's not overtly bad. In terms of the women's division, it's just listless. Nobody really has much direction. You can't compare it to when Vince was booking things, because that was horribly bad. It was overtly awful. It was Vince McMahon just didn't know how to do stuff at that point. And so it was just really bad. Last year in the build up to WrestleMania, we had this really terrific bloodline stuff that kind of overshadowed the rest of the card, kind of in a good way. It kind of hid some of the deficiencies, but the Bayley stuff, at least in the lead up to WrestleMania, was actually pretty strong. And at the time, I think Rhea Ripley was still part of Judgment Day, and that stuff was also pretty strong. Regardless, right now, it's just not good. Nobody's really doing anything that's all that interesting from a story perspective. Nobody really has stories except for this really protracted, endless who attacked Jade Cargill thing. And I don't know, maybe by the time the Chamber comes around, we'll figure some of that out, and there'll be kind of a meteor story heading into WrestleMania. I think that's a distinct possibility. But I will say this. I think the thing that makes me pessimistic about any of this getting any better is my overall philosophy. And Larson and I talk about this a lot over at Going in Raw. We talked about it literally today on the episode that went up, the podcast. The problem, in my opinion, is kind of a deep one, and it's going to take some digging out of. I feel like when Triple H took over, when he was given the full reins, without Vince, he had his ideas that he had wanted to implement for a while. He was ready to go. He had these ready to go. He'd been thinking about it. He probably saw the writing on the wall. And he did them, and he threw them all at us, and The Rock showed up, and somehow, some way, through all the backstage shenanigans and The Rock politicking, they were able to put together some pretty exciting TV. Rock went bad guy, and it was awesome, and he had also already had these stories because he was a big Judgment Day fan, and he was obviously a big Bayley fan, and he liked the damage control thing because he put that one together, and so that stuff was pretty strong. Those were ideas he was ready to go with. But, and this is an analogy we make over there at Going in Raw, when you're a band and you just got your start and you just got all these great songs that you commit to an album, and then you got to do your sophomore album. What do they call that? Your sophomore slump, right? When you have that first burst of ideas and you put them all out there and they're great, it ain't the easiest thing in the world to follow up. And I feel like that's what Triple H is going through right now. It's what's his next big story, because the big moments have been so few and far between. Basically, of CM, like, look at Drew McIntyre. We're already past the middle of February. Drew McIntyre had a banner 2024. What's he really done this year? Like, since the beginning of the year, it's kind of been like, okay, like this would have been a perfect year for Drew McIntyre to win the Rumble. Now, I understand you got CM Punk, you got Roman Reigns, you got Cody, you got Gunther, you got Jay, you got a bunch of other popular people, but Drew was the guy in 2024. He sacrificed as a character all those humiliations so that the character could then turn it around and have a strong 2025. His character arc has basically stopped. And I feel like Triple H, and the thing is, as good as he was last year with the men and with as decent as he was with the women, everything gets knocked down a bit. So it's like you've got some good stuff with the men, but now with the women, you had some decent stuff, and now you kind of have nothing. So I feel like the guy needs maybe a little bit of pressure relief. When you see those videos on social media of him coming up with entrances for wrestlers, like directing Jacob Fatu, that should be beneath his pay grade. There should be somebody else, Lee Fitting, Road Dogg, I don't know who. There should be somebody else directing that element. Or maybe Triple H just sits down with a guy and says, all right, we've got 10 minutes. This is what I want to see happen. You go implement it. He shouldn't be doing that shit himself. That's just my opinion. Look, I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm looking for possible reasons why. It feels like his time could be better spent doing stuff that aren't entrances. We all love a good entrance. They're not that difficult to do. With Pentagon, what is it? You got a bunch of fire in the background, you got a really cool kick-ass song, and you got a bunch of red light. That's not rocket science right there. I feel like you need to be booking out what WWE is kind of known for. The big moments, the big plot twists, the big swerves, the big turns, the big heel turns, the big face turns. You need all that stuff. It's not like it's all bad, but none of it is terribly compelling with the exception of maybe some Kevin Owens stuff here and there. At the Royal Rumble, we did have that bit between Roman, Seth, and Punk, but like they wrote Roman off for God knows how long. Punk is here and there. He got his chamber match, so he's been around. But I just feel like Triple H might have, it's kind of like AEW back in 2019. It's like, man, you've got this company with a bunch of minds who want to show us how it's done, and they did that, and everybody was really into it. But eventually, the ideas start to run out. And there was a long period of time when AEW was kind of listless creatively. They're starting to find their way again because they're focusing on the acts in the company that are strong. You get Jeff Jarrett out there for 10 minutes and it doesn't work. And so you pull that and you slot in Hangman Adam Page against MJF. Holy shit, there you go. You got the future of the company feuding against other futures of the company. It works. That's why AEW's been on a decent run lately. WWE has a lot of content. Probably too much. Because you got all these pay-per-views, plus you got Saturday night main events, you got the Saudi shows, you've expanded Raw from a nice little 2-hour run for a couple months. I know it was only 3 months, but it felt pretty good. You brought it back up to 3 hours on Netflix. Well, 2.5 hours on Netflix, I should say. And then on SmackDown, you've made that 3 hours. So it's a lot to do. It's a lot to do. You see, one of the reasons why NXT is probably as strong creatively as it is, or at least as varied as it is, because everybody gets some screen time in NXT and there's always stories moving there because it's only 2 hours. It's only 2 hours. Triple H has to deal with 3 times that, plus he's directing entrances. So that's what I think is going on. I just think that the dude is probably... it's too much on his plate. And it's the same criticism that we've levied as at Tony Khan as the potential reason why some of AEW stuff was lackluster for a while. Too much on his plate. So we'll see what happens with all that. But until there's a structural change in the creative, I don't see some creative renaissance after WrestleMania. We need some good shit now because WrestleMania is right around the corner. It is literally less than 2 months away. We are on the road. In 9 days, Elimination Chamber will be here and gone. And that Raw after Elimination Chamber better be fucking fire if you want people to be invested in your road to WrestleMania. DJ Luke D says, what's the end point of the New Day story? This is one of those that I thought that they would have, I don't know, picked up the pace a little bit on. They had that terrific Big E moment. Again, that was a really, really terrific moment, but where's the follow through? For the next couple of weeks, they really didn't do a whole hell of a lot. They've been feuding with Rey Mysterio kind of endlessly since then. I don't know where that's going exactly. The end point of the New Day storyline, I don't know that there is an end point of the New Day storyline. They're going to be heels for years. And you got to figure that at some point they will... The thing about the New Day is they'll be heels for a while. People aren't going to accept them as heels for that long, though, because they simply are going to be enjoying the work that they're doing. I kind of feel like the New Day need to dial back. I hate saying this, but maybe dial back on some of the more entertaining aspects of their character. Like, for example, when their entire families are there wearing New Day suck shirt, that's hilarious. Their stuff is amazing. I feel like they need to be like more violent and less entertaining. I don't know. I mean, that's a weird way to put it because the whole thing is it's supposed to be entertaining. But yeah, if they want to be bad guys, you got to do bad things. Parsath says, what person/subject in wrestling has been lost to history and deserves a movie/documentary to educate new fans? He says for him, it's El Santo. I would die to see an El Santo movie. I would love that. I think that'd be amazing. For me, it's Bruno Sammartino. I would absolutely flip my shit. By the way, I want to see that Queen of the Ring movie because I am interested in that. But a Bruno movie would be flipping fantastic in the right hands. It would be, I would die to see that. I would really, man, I would love to see that. I think his story is so fascinating. Having to escape Nazis, going up to like hide in caves when he's like a little kid, and then going up to being, selling out Madison Square Garden back in the day. Man, if they put a budget into that, holy shit, that could be outstanding. Andrew C says, with the appearance of Moose and the Hardys at NXT, how soon do you think WWE will pull the trigger for NXT TNA Worlds Collide? It kind of feels like they're heading in that direction right now. We're going to get Fraxium versus the Hardys at some point. You think that could be one of the big matches there at a Worlds Collide show. They're laying the groundwork for it. So you got to figure. I mean, I don't know what the schedule's like right now. I know they got a Madison Square Garden show, Roadblock, I think, coming up. And then they've got Stand and Deliver in April. So maybe post Stand and Deliver. Maybe they'll do it after Stand and Deliver. Jared Smith says, since you already answered this, but with male wrestlers, I'm kind of curious what your Mount Rushmore of women's wrestlers are. Okay, so number one, I will fully admit I am not super well versed in the Japanese women's wrestling scene. I mean, going back decades. So I'm not really the person to answer, but if you want my personal fandom, my own personal Mount Rushmore of women's wrestlers, I'll be honest, a lot of them, like Lita would be on there because like I remember watching Lita back in the day and being like, oh my God, why don't they do more of this? Why don't they focus on more than just her and Trish? I know there were plenty of other amazing women in the division back then, but like Lita and Trish were the ones they really elevated. And I feel like there was a lot of money to be made there, and they did not give many minutes at all to the rest of the women. So my personal Mount Rushmore would probably be, I mean, it'd be a lot of names that are still active right now. So I'm going to put Lita on there. I'd do Lita. I'd put Charlotte. I'd put probably Asuka. And you know what? I'd put Athena on there. I think Athena is terrific, man. I love her matches. She's really terrific. Tyler Warden says, any thoughts on WWE Evolve? Will it boost those oh so important to-be numbers? I mean, you know, I'll check it out. I'm not expecting much, but anytime there's like a new wrestling show on, I'll check it out for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's just developmental for developmental. So we'll see. I guess, is that where they're going to have those new WWE ID titles? Jono Davey says, do you think Tony Khan should implement an excessively large ring for the next pay-per-view? Or would that be too petty? 30 by 30. Just massive. Just a fucking sea of wrestlers. Have multiple matches going on at the same time in one 40 by 40 ring. One Pika Peen says, how do you feel about Ricky Saints? We talked about that a lot on the show today. But in short, I'm kind of curious as to what just from a curiosity standpoint, I'm really kind of curious why he needed to change his name. Don't know. Name is fine. We'll get used to it. 2 months from now, 3 months from now, he'll be in our heads Ricky Saints and not Ricky Starks. So I'm fine with it. I'm just sort of curious as to why they had to do it. I know there's all sorts of different theories out there, but I don't think there's anything official on record, nor I don't think he'll really say what the deal is. But yeah, I'm kind of curious as to why, when everybody else seems to keep their names these days, he had to change his. Tyler Bwensley says, the new WWE ID championships, does WWE really need more belts after just launching the women's US and IC championships? There is no way, no how, no chance that those titles are going to make their way to main roster ever. You will not see him on main roster. You might see him on NXT. You'll see him on Evolve, and that's going to be it. You might see them in NXT, maybe, but they're going to be on that Evolve show, and that's it. They will not sniff main roster. All right, that's going to do it for this Ask WrestleJuice. Thank you so much for your questions. I appreciate it, and until next time, we'll see you guys around.